Okay, let's try this. Hello. So, I'm staring here at a video that's kind of cool because it's rendered in this sort of pseudo PS1 or PS1 graphics where the vertices of the meshes are sort of snap into end positions. It's kind of cool, so you see all of the jittering. Anyway, so this chap has done this video. What's his name? I don't remember. Doesn't matter. But the gaming industry destroys its workers. Pum pum pum. Okay, so I've been in the gaming industry for 19 years, something like that. So I've been around a bit, so I have a few opinion. Apparently the channel is called Action. Action? Okay. Anyway, so now he comes up with a conclusion. And I've got controversial opinions for a change, so I shall express them.
Many indie studios are on strict budgets and can't start recouping their losses until the game comes out. AAA studios have pressure from execs and shareholders, basically telling them that the game needs to do well or they'll be shut down. For a vast majority of projects, there is some level of franticness trying to get the game out in a timely manner. But that doesn't mean crunch culture needs to stick around. Planning through middle management, restraint, and, as Team Cherry puts it, controlled scope creep are all things that can help alleviate the stress of 80-hour work weeks. Not to mention unionization efforts around the world that have already yielded positive results. For now, the video game industry still feels like the Wild West, trying to find its footing and figure out clear rules of engagement when it comes down to the wire. But it's important to remember that the games you love are the result of thousands of hours of work by real human beings. Crunch culture in gaming is a deep-rooted issue that could take years, if not decades, to address. But
in fact, not just decades, how about centuries? Okay, so the video game industry is not a Wild West at all. The video game industry has been around for, goodness gracious, what would you argue, the 80s? So 40 years now. And the crunch issue hasn't been solved. Now, first, let's just explain what crunch means. You touched on it before. Basically, crunch is the term used for the people in the know for having to work really, really, really long hours in order to achieve something. In the case of a video game, it's usually going to be reaching some specific milestone that you're supposed to reach at a certain time, but more often than not, that milestone has some kind of like real life implication. For example, you are going to demonstrate the product at some convention, say like PAX, so you need to make sure that the product is in as good of a state as you can get it before you show it to people, or you are doing some kind of meeting in front of shareholders if that's the company you work for, or you need to show something to the producer, CEO to get it approved, whatever, that sort of thing. In the case of indie is you're launching or you have a community event or whatever. Everybody has some kind of deadline, usually, that they go after. They touched on Team Cherry before. That's a specific team. I'm not going to go into details of that, but basically they had the luxury of being able not to have to do this. So fundamentally speaking, nobody wants crunch. This is obvious. Nobody wants to work 75 hours a week as a default thing. I say nobody, that's not entirely accurate, but let's go with that principle to start. Like everybody wants to have some kind of work-life balance, obviously. But one needs to account for many things. So let us begin one by one. So nice. Well done, Mike. So the first thing I want to talk about is what video games are. They get frequently compared to film or other things, other sort of entertainment-driven artistic endeavors. But you can't do that. Because video games are films that you control. And that particular thing opens up a gigantic Pandora's box. Basically, let's take a few examples. For example, a film, right? I've never made a film, so I could be talking some rubbish. But I suspect the way a film works is you organize the people you need, you have a script written, it is approved, you've got everything ready, you've got the equipment you need, there's a huge amount of cost straight up, right? And then it is pure crunch for a short period of time. So for a certain amount of time, you are going to be spending all of your money to make this picture as great as you can. And then you're going to be spending lots of time in production, meaning you need to edit things and whatnot. A completely different skill set. But for example, the actors at that point are done, or you might need to call them in for a couple of voice lines or whatever, right? That's where the VFX artists and all of and the editors and need to do all of their magic jam, right? They, I'm sure, will be crunching heavily whenever you make a film, no question, because it's got this festival you need to go to and this thing you need to do and and it costs an arm and a leg to do. Okay. The advantage of a film, however, is that it's a one and done thing. So you have absurd things you can do. Say, for example, I need a blade of grass moving or something like that. Okay, I don't need to travel to some other place. I can do some clever camera angles to capture that blade of grass in that way. Okay? You produce a product that's very, very, very highly refined and very highly specific for a duration of 2-3 hours of final product. Okay? Music is similar, only even easier, quote unquote, to do. That I have some experience with. First of all, it's all audio. You don't need to worry about anything else. So you don't have to worry about multiple dimensions outside from, I suppose, which channel the audio is coming out of and how deep it feels, like it is forward and backwards, etc. I'm not an engineer from that perspective, but I have dabbled substantially. Anyway, so that makes a product that usually lasts 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes if you're Dream Theater 20, but or Metallica of old. But it's still a monodimensional single thing, and you produce a very small product. Now, using these two as starting examples, how about this? Video games need to include literally everything I've just said, plus all of the programming logic of a software, like a tool, like, don't know, Microsoft Excel or something. All of that needs to be there. And we like to give our players liberty, which means that the player can explore whichever virtual place we put them in, which means my virtual place, like a movie set, has one single direction. It's a green screen. I put the camera on the green screen, the actor does something, then I fill the green space with some magic stuff. Okay, brilliant. And that's not how video games work at all. I can move the camera, I can do all sorts of ridiculous stuff. And I need to account for all of that as somebody who makes it. So it's very, very multidisciplinary, very, 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 very complex. Making a game, any game, it almost doesn't matter how simple. Getting it from start to end, even something like a small puzzle game, will take you months of work. And of course, it depends on how many people you have and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the first premise, okay? Because in the film industry you crunch like mad, and I didn't mention the music thing. Say, for example, when you tour in music, right? You crunch like an idiot, okay? Or, different example, if you're into racing, right? And you need to, say, rallying, the poor rally mechanics, when a stage ends, right? they have like, what, 10 minutes or something to do whatever they can to repair the car that the driver's just smashed up a little bit, or whatever. And everybody's crunching like mad in certain situations, right? For reasons that are very strange to me, but I suspect they are related to the fact that the gaming industry has so many disciplines in it. Crunch in the video game industry is seen as sort of this magical thing that should not exist, which is very odd. But it does. It absolutely does. It exists all the time, and it's a complete fool's errand to try and remove it. And there are numerous reasons why this is the case. For example, the Pareto distribution. So I'm now taking the discussion to a different place. To recap, I've just spoken about how the gaming industry is complex and it needs loads of different disciplines, all of them are running at the same time, having to get to the finish line at the same time, and so on and so forth. Now let's talk about a different concept, which is the people. Okay, you need lots of people to make a video game. unless you do it all on your own, then you need to be the lots of people. We call those people the multiple hat wearers. I will be one of those. What happens is that people are different. The Pareto distribution, I believe it's called, from this, I think, Hispanic, I don't know from where, South American or something, behavioral scientist that had studied how companies or groups of workers function, right? He figured out that approximately some very low percentage, I don't remember what it is, that's 10 or something, percent of the workforce produces 80% of the output. These are the very passionate people. The people that work like absolute lunatics because they want to. In this video, it's actually covered. It was covering an example of some chap working at Blizzard on a product called World of Warcraft, and he was just completely obsessed with making the cave environments prettier, more detailed, and more interesting, and so on and so forth. And at some point he was able to, the producers were telling him, you gotta stop doing this because it doesn't have a return on investment. And he was like, yeah, but I want to do it. And they said, listen, you can do it, but you gotta do it on your own time. I can't pay you for this. And he still said yes. Right? No, these are people like me. I'm like that too. What some people dismissively call perfectionists and whatnot. But these are the people, well, in this case, he's very specific to something that didn't have a return on investment or whatever. That's a very difficult thing to figure out, particularly when you're working in a creative field, when you want to make something. You want to make that level ever so slightly better. You want to make those controls ever so slightly better. You want to make, and so on and so forth, right? And these people are essentially unsung heroes. Okay, because when you see the credits, the list of credits, everybody's listed in the same way, but it doesn't tell you which guy or gal worked their tail off in order to make sure that that particular feature is that ever so slightly better. And it may become even a selling point of the product, but you will never know. These are things that sort of disappear. A bit like in sports, when you have a team and everybody contributes, of course, but some contribute more than others. And in sports, it somehow comes out, usually because, again, sports are within a very contained space. But when you're talking about video games are so enormous that it becomes very difficult to tell, right, who the special people are. But I'm telling you right now, there are loads of special people around. And if you don't know who they are, well, then it's not you. That's normal. And it's fine. There's room in the world for everybody. But there are some people that are very passionate about what they do in life. And that's part of their raison d'etre. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to be. And that's why they do it. And that's why they put more effort than everybody else, or seemingly than everybody else around them. Sometimes, I have had this in my life, you have sort of dream teams in which essentially everybody carries their weight really well. And when that happens, you have a kind of harmonious place in which it is actually somewhat possible not to crunch, because everybody's so good. But for example, in my previous project, and I'm not going to name names or whatever, actually I'm not even going to say previous, I suppose I just said it, but a project that I worked on, there was a scenario in which I was sure that I was the best person to deal with user interface in the entire group of people I was working with. And I had told one of the CEOs, or excuse me, one of the head honchos, I have told them, I will one day completely rebuild the UI, user interface UI. And he said, no, you won't. You won't. I said, okay, you'll see, it will happen. So I had a completely different role in the shebang. And then as we are about to reach submission, which is a process for which you need to send your final product to a console manufacturer for them to verify that the product works properly and follow certain guidelines. We were supposed to submit, and in like a month or something, or half a month. and the UI was a complete mess. That's because an individual in the team who was in charge of doing that simply did not know enough to deal with it, and definitely did not have the crunch mentality. Definitely missing, right? So we have a situation in which the product is fine and it works, but the UI is just a complete mess and doesn't function at all. And certainly is a far cry from being a professional product. Okay, so I go, how about now? Do I get the green light to do this? Or are you gonna keep being stubborn? And they gave me the green light. At which point I shut myself in my office and worked incessantly, probably sleeping about 4 hours per night. In 2 weeks, I did the whole UI, right? And for example, then the art team was going like, hey man, like we need to art this up. It needs to look more like this or more like that. I said, we don't have the luxury of time, fellas. That's not happening, okay? We are gonna make it look simple but functional. And it needs to animate, do all sorts of cool things, but it needs to do it within reason. We do not have the time to make this great. Take it up with the other boys. It's not... I'm not authorizing this. I basically had to become a dictator on that particular aspect, right? And that creates some resentments and whatnot. But fundamental point, in 2 weeks the UI is functional, works, supports a bunch of languages, supports a bunch of input systems, supports a bunch of different resolutions, and so on and so forth. So I am firmly convinced that me doing that saved the game. I am also firmly convinced that it did wreck me a little bit. I had to deal with what people refer to as burnout after. Yes, but it's what I wanted to do. And there's many reasons why I wanted to do that, right? So I'd go, well, we've worked on this for 1 year. I'm not letting it go. I'm not letting the game tank or not function because this is missing. This fundamental necessary element is missing or completely dysfunctional. I don't care. I will work as long as I have to make it happen. Because at that point, what I could do is what these stupid idiots that talk in this way, like this guy in this video, do, which I could have just said, it's fine. Mistakes were made before, I'm just not gonna care. But I do care. Just like the guy that was working on the caves. I care. And I don't care whether you see an ROI on it or not, which you should in the case, the example that I made. And I don't care what anybody has to say. And I don't care to point fingers. Because people would need to point fingers in this particular case, right? The head honcho who suggested the wrong individual to do that job, for whatever reasons he thought was right, caused this problem. And that's fine. And the individual who wasn't capable of doing the thing wasn't willing to put in the hours to get good at it. So essentially learn on the job and then effectively do at least a half decent job of that. All of this, by the way, is buried. So everything I'm saying is not visible in any credits or anywhere else, etc., etc. So, it's all nice and secret, and you're going to have to do a lot of deduction work before you can argue that I'm throwing somebody under the bus. In fact, au contraire, what I'm trying to say is that I think it's unproductive to throw people under the bus, but I am also saying that there is a reality in which somebody, in this case me, had to step up and do this, and do the crunch. The idiot in the video said, careful planning is going to solve this, as if. Well, that's the thing. It's the Wild West, the gaming industry. What level of retarded hubris do you have? You just made a stupid video. Okay, actually a really cool one. I really like the PlayStation 1 style rendering. Though the resolution is too high. But anyway. What I was gonna say is, how do you think that everybody in the industry is either evil or retarded? These are your only two options. Apparently, every manager or whatever is either going to, demand or with these evil mitts that the people work more. You gotta work more and more for some reason, right? Or they're either completely stupid in estimating deadlines, for example. Well, everybody is completely idiotic when estimated deadlines on a product this complex. It doesn't, like, the level of expertise that you have doesn't feature, especially because you start having lots of people working, and every one person is valued in the team, so they have like creative input. Say a person comes up with an idea and they go, oh yeah, that's a cool idea, we must have that in the product. Then you discuss it with the team, even a small team, and you agree, that's a cool idea, let's do it, right? And we refer to this in the industry as a scope. Scope is basically what you plan on doing. That's the scope. And you start with some scope. But then as you develop the product, something happens. And we have a name for that as well, which is scope creep. Meaning you notice potential for more scope. Let's say you have a character that jumps, and then you figure out, okay, the jump is cool and all, but I think we can get a lot of mileage out of changing the way the jumping works in such a specific way that it opens up new possibilities. That's just an example of scope creep, right? And of course, when you get closer to deadlines and stuff and the game already feels great, you can frequently start saying, okay, enough with the scope creep, we're not going to do that. The point is, scope does grow naturally. People want to do it, and you know, teams that work well together are going to be intelligent in managing the scope and communicating it to one another, and they are going to help each other when the inevitable amount of passion, because in this industry we work based on passion fundamentally, at least lots of us. There are lifers, but many of us are passionate, right? Are going to go, yeah, I don't care. I'm still going to do it. And if you don't want to help me, I'll do it alone. It does happen. It does happen. There was a previous company that I worked for, AAA company. I worked on a particular type of work. I need to be super vague. Basically, I had to interface with the public all the time, and in a lab. And this lab had a bunch of consoles, and all of these consoles would need to have a certain version of a certain product installed on them in order to be able to then do this, what we would refer to as session, with these external players. Now there's a whole process. The external players need to come in, they need to sign an NDA, they need to do all sorts of things. You need to prepare some levels of basic catering for them to be able to stick around for a couple of hours or whatever. All of the machines need to have the product installed and functional, and so on and so forth. Now, I noticed a gaping hole in that particular system because the installing on the consoles was taking an idiotic amount of time. So what I did is I went, at the time I wasn't even a programmer, so I was a budding programmer, let's put it this way. And at the time I went to one of the departments that I thought was going to have the same problem, and I asked them, do you have a solution for this? And they said, yeah, we use batch systems in order to install this on numerous machines at the same time. I said, tell me more. So they showed me a couple of things, and then I used some ingenuity to modify the things that they showed me for my own purposes. And bada bing, bada boom, I was using this system to prepare the lab, at least from a software perspective, in advance. In fact, so much so that later I think Microsoft inserted, Microsoft as an example, inserted these tools automatically in their later consoles in the dev kit. So you were able to send stuff via batch, or batch stuff you send to various machines using their interfaces that they themselves made. Well, I was early on that, and many more people before me, like this department I was talking about. So I'm not special, but I was special enough to go, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I showed it to my colleagues, but my colleagues did not have knowledge or the willfulness, I don't know, to understand how these tools work, and therefore they never did it, and they kept on being absurdly inefficient, while I was doing 5 times as many sessions as everybody else because I had removed this. And yes, I had crunched to make that happen, and then because I was doing more sessions, it caused me more crunch to analyze the results and then present them to the developers, to the interested people. Right? So I caused my own crunch. Right? And I was happy to do it. And it was unpaid overtime, and I knew it was unpaid, and I would still do it. because I want the product to be great. And what do you do about people like me? If you remove crunch, I'll tell you what you do. You frustrate the living crap out of us. We are trying to fix things, and by company policy, by careful management, like in the case of the example I gave you before, right? You actually cause the crunch later. You cause severe crunch later. You actually cause stupid crunch at that point. And you cause resentment in people. Anyway, the crunch problem is endemic to the machinery of how you make things. Anything that is video games, like I said, rally, whatever. Everybody's crunching all the time. And everybody who wants to do something that matters. Like, let's change just real quick. Like, let's think about Kobe Bryant and the Mamba mentality. The Mamba mentality is literally crunch every day, all day. Right? And he's a hero. The point is, everybody who knows that they want to mean something to themselves or to others is going to crunch. It's deliberate. It's a choice, right? And there's a bunch of people who they may rely on, etc., who are not going to, because that's not their life. They don't care about being the MVP. They don't care about winning that 5th ring. Right? That for them, it doesn't matter. They're there to do a job. They do the job. They finish the job. They're done. And that's great. That's fine. Right? But you can never rely on these people to help you when you do need to do the crunch, whether the crunch is your own fault or an external fault or a mix of everything, which is why pointing fingers is so pointless. Right? So anyway, that covers the careful management. Careful management is a completely idiotic point of view. It's very difficult to manage an ocean of, say, in a large company, 1,000 cats, okay? It's almost impossible to do it. And the mere fact that games come out at all in AAA and they are so well made as they are is a miracle, to be honest. Okay? So that's point number 1. Point number 2, unionize, please don't. Oh, please do not unionize for any reason. Then you lose negotiation power. You have to follow all sorts of rules. You need to be part of a group. And if you don't want to, you're just removed. You just aren't welcome here. The unionization process exists in various European countries, etc. And it's absolutely terrible. For example, my father-in-law did not want to strike. He used to work for Fiat, right, in Italy. He didn't want to go on strike. He didn't believe in the motivation of that strike. And then he would get a huge amount of bullying at the office coming in because he was what at the time people referred to as a crumiro. I don't actually know where the word comes from or why it's like that, but whatever. It means somebody who refuses to be part of the group of the union. Yeah, because that person has a brain of their own. And they don't want to be part of your stupid mobbing groups. And therefore, what do you do in order to get them to fall in line? You bully them. Beautiful. That's what unions are. Unions are basically a mob system. Okay? And what they do is that they ruin your life by lobbying for legislation and that sort of stuff. The irony is the people that end up crunching anyway, because they will crunch even if the union is there. They end up crunching way more, but with way more bureaucratic snags. In fact, it's more likely to leave. When the fool in the video said the video game industry is a Wild West, what are you talking about? There's HR departments everywhere. All the time. They are so flippin' annoying. And they cost you an arm and a leg in overhead money as well. And you have to put them in by law. In fact, you could argue that I have left the AAA gaming industry because HR departments and this level of organization and micromanagement have become necessary. Or, have become mandated. I don't want to be part of that. So now I'm indie. And I work alone. And I can crunch as much as I bloody want to. Right? Or as little as bloody want to. I don't want to work on Monday? I don't. I want to work on Tuesday twice as long? I do. Questions? Nobody bothers me. Right? It's called liberty, man. And because what the theory that's posited is that crunching is essentially a necessary evil, but it's nobody works towards avoiding it. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely silly. Like I said, everybody doesn't want to crunch, but there are things that happen: bad decisions, errors, some kind of technical problem, an unexpected hurdle, etc. All of these things pile on, but and then they cause essentially an inflation of work. But what doesn't change is the deadline that you set. If you say, I'm going to run out of money by September the 4th of this year for this product. Okay, this is my plan. The plan is meticulous. It's done well. We thought about it. Everybody agrees it. We got buy-in. Okay, issue. Plan starts creeping, right? And you start having problems. Then you need to make a decision. Can I get more money to get past September 4, or is September 4 the 4th a hard deadline? If it's a hard deadline, well then it doesn't matter what I do. I either need to start cutting features, that sort of stuff. That, for example, is something the public absolutely has no idea of. How many features are consistently cut on the chopping block because there is no time and no budget to continue working on those features that were in the initial plan. Happens all the damn time. In fact, it's so damn common, it literally happens every time, I think, on every project. So now, one last thing I want to touch on, and that is, and then I'll do a conclusion and then we're done. So I want to touch on the fact that Team Cherry was able to do their hit game without crunch. Yes, they developed it for 7 years. So their first game, Hollow Knight, was very successful. I've never played it. I'm sure it's fantastic. Okay, it's what we refer to as a Metroidvania. I don't really want to explain all of the details of this. Chances are anybody who's listening to this has at least some vague idea of this stuff. So anyway, they made this game very successful. It was very good. I think they made it as a passion project, and then eventually it became a project. I do not know where they got funding. I don't know, and I don't care, and it doesn't matter. Point is, they, unlike me, for example, they released an indie title that was very, 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 very successful. More power to them. Great, right? Now, it is absurdly rare. I want to underline this. Absurdly rare for indie teams to be successful with a product. Some are, okay? It's fantastic. For example, I never was. As a solo indie, I have never been successful, right? And there's other people who also haven't been successful, say, with hits, but they have been successful over time and so on and so forth. That's great. Everybody's story is different, okay? But there are some indie teams that become massively successful somehow. Cherry would be one of them, okay? Then, when they released Hollow Knight 2, they took their sweet time. But they could, at least in part, because they had this enormous success coming in at first. So they could do it, right? So they could not crunch. They could not announce the game until they wanted to. They could take their sweet time. That's great. More power to them. But this is entirely contingent upon having that success initially. I wonder how much they crunched on the first game, if they did at all. They might have done. I was listening recently to an interview to the chap that made a game called Vampire Survivors, also very successful. And he was crunching like mad to do that at the beginning. And then the game got some traction, became successful, kept on growing, and he crunched in a completely different way. And now he can slow down and crunch less, right? But, you know, he had to go through the pain of crunching in order to become successful at first, that sort of thing. That's just liberty, man. That's the expression of liberty. Crunch is a beautiful thing. Okay? So, now, conclusion. Enough with me chatting. It's already half an hour. So, conclusion. Number 1, do not unionize for any reason. Number 2, you're going to take government grants? Well, you're immoral. You don't deserve any government grants. I already hate government at the best of times. When they do cancer research with that money, or fix the roads. Now you go, I'm part of the arts. I need to be subsidized. No, you suck. You subsidize with crunch. Work more. That's what you do. Okay. Now Loads of people disagree with me. Remember, this is Mike's Opinionated channel, and Mike's Opinionated doesn't care necessarily about the fact that you disagree. Feel free to share in the comments if that's what you want. I don't care. Unless it's a very solid argument, it's very unlikely I'm gonna change my opinion. So 3, do not unionize for any reason. It's going to cause severe issues to everybody. There's loads of people, I'm sure, that disagree with unionizing, right? I don't want to be part of a collective. I'm sure there's going to be lots of people that don't want to be part of a collective. I don't want the government to tell me if I can work Wednesdays or not. I don't want the government to tell me whether I can work overtime or not. I will do whatever the hell I want, whenever the hell I want. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And 4, no, the video game industry is not in its infancy. The video game industry is very mature by now. Okay, and what you need to do, instead of pretending that this is a problem, is accept that this is a byproduct of the thing, of making such complicated things where passion is involved, because they're fundamentally artistic in nature. That's what we do. We crunch. Disagree all you want. Keep fighting against the magical windmills. Don Quixote. That's his name in Spanish? I don't know. Well, I don't care. So, yes, this video was interesting to watch primarily because of its rendering, but it's absolutely full of rubbish. Sorry. Bye.